welcome to the Open Mic Comedy Podcast. I'm your host, Mark. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. This podcast is here for everybody on the open mic comedy circuit, whether you're a comedian, an MC, a promoter, or a tutor. Even comedy fans who enjoy watching the stars of the future in pub basements. If you're thinking I could do that, then this podcast will guide you on what to expect on this crazy circuit from those right in the middle of it. Today's guest is someone who has been transferring work skills into an entertaining life in stand-up. He's clearly a very keen learner. If the FBI were after some investigative profilers, it'd be a good job with your social media. He could be an advocate for the clamogram. So please welcome to the stage, it's Mr. Kevan Hall.
Thank you very much.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing really well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. Busy night of gigging, back into it today, and just kind of decompress from what goes on after a gig.
Yes, it's a kind of interesting phenomenon, isn't it? I've had two sides of it this week. Tuesday I was in Sweden doing my day job, presenting to 250 people on matrix management, and then last night I was in Hatfield in a pub room doing stand-up. So it's kind of, and some of the things are the same, and some of the things are very different. So it's been a fun week.
So we're going to touch a bit on because for people that don't know you, you're very new to stand-up. What's your general background in work life and stuff like that?
Sure. So I started off, I came from a very rural area, and my entire motivation in early life was to make money and get out. And so I kind of went to university, joined big multinationals. I worked 15 years in big multinationals in the UK and France. Worked my way through till I was running global teams and director of a multinational at 35, and then decided that all stress in life was caused by other people not agreeing with what I wanted to do. And so I left and started my own business 30 years ago, and built that business into a global business operating around the world. I've got people in the Americas, people in Asia, working with large multinationals, training people how to work more effectively.
Okay, so with all of you've I guess you speak to people on a constant daily basis if you're doing training courses and seminars and stuff like that. So projecting yourself is quite key, which I guess moves into the world of stand-up comedy then.
Yeah, that's been a fantastic advantage. I've been consistently, when I've gone on, people said, how many gigs have you done? And I've said, well, 5 at the time. And they've said, come on. Yeah. I said, well, I have spent 35 years kind of training and doing keynote speeches and those kind of things. So I'm very grateful to have that kind of basic skill. And when I see new people coming on for the first time and they're doing it, but they're shaking both inside and sometimes outside, I do feel sorry for them. But you're getting over that initial fear of public speaking thing,
So what made you want to move into stand-up?
I tend to get a little bit obsessive about stuff when I'm learning. Learning is kind of my passion. Yeah. And I was trying to step back a little bit from my main business, thinking about retirement and what else do I want to do in life. And I wrote a book, you can probably see over my shoulder if you're on the video version, called Find Your Purpose. And in that, it was looking at how do you identify your purpose in life? What are your strengths? What are your passions? What are your skills? And then thinking, how can I apply that in different domains? And so as I went through that exercise, that consistently the message I was getting from the tests and evaluations I did was, you love learning, you like communicating, you're a writer, so you like to get ideas across, and you like to try a different way of doing things and all this kind of stuff. And then I thought, okay, where else can I apply this? I guess everyone thinks they're naturally hilarious, don't they, Mark?
Yeah.
And so I like to think I've used humour a little bit in my training, but I thought that's a kind of different domain. There's got to be a lot to learn there in comedy. Having researched for myself about retirement, I ended up writing a book about it, developing 3 training courses about how you become engaged at work and starting stand-up comedy. So I think I've concluded I'm not going to be very good at retiring.
Well, it's that adage, isn't it? If you're enjoying work, it's probably not work.
That's exactly it. I can honestly say I haven't done anything that I didn't really enjoy doing for like 35 years. And so I ain't going to start now.
Yeah, I don't blame you. So how many books have you got out then?
I've written 7 books, all about kind of management topics. I developed the world's first remote teams training program 35 years ago, which is, after COVID was an overnight success. And all things to do with kind of large companies, how you kind of cut through complexity, get stuff done.
That's all quite interesting then. So when you mentioned about applying humour to the training courses, because I guess that's especially in the modern age, that needs to happen more, because people's attention spans are not the best. I know for myself, I work in a corporate environment as well as a day job, and you get sent these e-learning things to do, and you look at it, and if any, there'll be people that know exactly what I'm talking about. You look at it and go, okay, is there a quiz? Okay, I've got to pay 50% of attention to this.
Yeah.
If there's no quiz and I've just got a tick, I've understood it. It stays on the screen for as long as I think I can get away with, and then I tick the box. I don't need to know it. It's not part of my job. It's just a tick box exercise. But then when you actually need to engage somebody, you have to do you have to make it fun as well. So I actually used to do, when I was working within an office environment, we used to have these things called lunch and learn sessions, where everybody in your department would get together in a big boardroom. The company would pay for lunch, and one person every week or every couple of weeks would give a little presentation of what they've been doing and fun things they've been learning. And what I noticed was that some people would use that to gorge on lunch and just zone out.
Yeah.
So when it came to my turn, I walked in with those little mini bags of Haribo and just put them in front of me. And then when it got to talking for 5 minutes, I would ask a question just to everybody about what I was talking about. And if whoever answered correctly, I'd throw them a bag of sweets. And all of a sudden everybody's engaged.
Exactly.
I want that. And then it's just and then for 5 minutes later, it's another bag of sweets to go. And it was just a really good way of getting people engaged and wanting to be part of it rather than just zoning out.
Yeah, there's always a way. And, I like to think kind of interactivity is in the DNA of my organisation. It's kind of what we do. And I give you a kind of outside work example. When my son was 16, his school was looking for people to speak about careers. And the traditional career was like the army or, the accountants coming in and presenting to a group of 16-year-old boys for 30 minutes and then asking them if anybody wanted to ask a question, where the 16-year-old boys don't like to raise their hands.
No.
I did working in a multinational company, and I just took along, some I worked for Mars most of my career, so I took some Mars bars, some pet food, some Uncle Ben's rice, and I said, okay, threw them out into the group and said, take those apart, open the kit cans, try the pet food, look at all the ingredients, and then try and imagine all the jobs that go into making that, and write them all on Post-it notes. And then I got them out, and we put the Post-it notes up, and we kind of organised it so they could see a supply chain and a functional organisation. They absolutely loved it. And all day people will come and say, we can't get any interaction from these people. So, well, what are you doing?
Yeah.
No, I can't stop them interacting, but you've got to design for it.
Yeah, I guess with bringing humour into all of it as well, it's the attention span of somebody. You make somebody laugh, a few seconds in, and they're immediately back in. It's the whole, I guess it's the TikTok and Instagram Reels thing, the attention span of people. I think I've seen it before where it's been said, if you put out a reel on Instagram that's longer than 30 seconds, the engagement is far less than something that's 15 seconds. Yeah,
we've done the same research on e-learning videos, so nothing more than 3.5 minutes. Otherwise, people don't watch it. But humour's part of the way. There's lots of other ways of engaging as well. So we run webinars, and our principle is you must get people to do something every 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Answer a question, respond to something, put a thumbs. It can be anything, because otherwise, like you say, they're off doing emails or something else. So the humour is part of engagement, activity. Relevance is important. You'll see one of my books behind there, Kill Bad Meetings, and we researched a lot of meetings and found that 40% of what happened was not relevant to anybody in the meeting. And so half of what we spend our time doing in meetings is completely pointless. So there is a certain amount of humour there that we bring out as well.
With your actual own transition, what made you decide I'm going to give stand-up a go?
Yeah, I think it was that that match with my skill set and interest set, if you like. If I'm going to do something new, if I'm going to commit to it, it has to be something where I'm going to it's going to take a long time to learn. Because if I can learn it in a week, I'm not interested. And so I thought, well, stand-up's kind of interesting because, first of all, can it be learned? Because there are some, maybe we could talk about that. There's some different views on whether it's born or developed. But there clearly is a lot of it. I mean, I read one thing which might have put some people off, but really motivated me, which is, the crowd is your only editor. At the end of the day, if the audience thinks it's funny, it is.
Yeah.
And an amazing statistic that even professional comedians, when they write new stuff, only get laughs 50% of the time. And I thought, wow, that must be quite hard then. So that complexity attracted me, really.
Yeah. So how many gigs are you in now then?
20.
20.
Yeah.
And
one thing I wanted to say, Mark, quite early on in this conversation is to all those people thinking 20 gigs, what's he got to say about comedy? Please don't take anything I say about comedy per se with a little bit of pinch of salt. But I think what I do know a lot about is learning.
Yeah.
and how we accelerate the development of skills and abilities, because I've been doing that for more than 40 years now. So that's the bit where I think I can perhaps help out with people new to the circuit.
Yeah, cool. What have your general experiences on this open mic circuit been? It's been interesting to hear what you thought it was going to be like to what it actually is like for you.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a lot of people say it's a bit like an apprenticeship. It's not something you can learn in a book. You've just got to get up and start and do it. And there's a famous Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Outliers, where he talked about how you get really good at stuff. And he came up with this statistic that you need 10,000 hours to get really good at stuff. It's rubbish. It's one of those things that's become highly popular for being untrue. What he was talking, the secret is intentional practice, right?
Yeah.
And for intentional practice, you've got to do something with an intention to improve, and then you've got to get feedback and develop and improve. And I see an awful lot of people on the comedy circuit just doing their stuff, but not recording and evaluating what they've done, not getting any coaching or feedback, and that's a slow route.
Yeah.
And so I see a lot of people who've got talent but not much structure, and I know you can go too much the other way, but I kind of feel if they had a little bit more sense of where they were going, they could be great.
Yeah. But what about the circuit in terms of ambience of the circuit and stuff? Because when I've said quite a few times on this, is that when I started, I didn't realize there was an open mic circuit.
Yeah.
I had no idea this thing existed. Walking into it and you see lots of other people that are in the same boat as you immediately. And it's quite a encouraging and supportive network, I find, because everybody wants to entertain, everybody wants to be funny, but everybody's in the same situation.
Yeah, I agree, and that's been really nice. Very quickly you get to know a few people, particularly around the areas that you go more often, and you recognise the same faces. And already after 20 gigs, it's pretty rare I go on somewhere where I don't know at least one or two of the other people on the bill, which is really nice.
Yeah.
And so you catch up and you see how their stuff is developing, and so that's nice. And social media allows you to see what else they're doing. So I really enjoy that side of it, that kind of sense of community. And in the past, a lot of my work was face to face, so I was flying around the world doing conferences and that kind of stuff, and I kind of liked that live vibe, if you like. Since COVID, that's switched all around now, so it's kind of 90% webinar, 10% face to face. And so for me personally, that kind of being in the room with people, getting that feedback, having a bit of a chat, replaces something I was used to in the training space.
Yeah. Okay. In your first 20 gigs, then have you had a bomb?
I wouldn't say it was a complete bomb, but I had one where it was, you can imagine the scenario. The Euros are on, you're in a sunny pub in the early evening, you get into your set and you kind of, it's going reasonably well, and then somebody drops a tray of glasses, and that hasn't happened to you before, and you're thinking, oh, okay, so are you dealing with that? And then just as you're a bit about to come up to your big finish, somebody drops another tray of glasses. Yep. They went out of that thinking, I'm just not sure that landed. So, people were fine with it, but I wasn't. I thought I didn't know how to handle that dynamic. And so I went away and spent a lot of time reading about stuff and thinking about stuff. And so it's great learning. And I think if you take it as learning, then, bombing is certainly learning, right?
Oh, there was a recent guest that said to me, one of the best pieces of advice he had was bomb as early as possible.
Right.
You need to know what that feeling's like,
yeah,
and whether you can get over that as well. Because if you can't get over that, then don't put all your effort into carrying on. But if you can get over it, it proves you've got some mental strength to actually understand why it happened, whether it was you, whether it was the crowd, whatever it was. You can put that in a box and go, right, that's the reason that happened. I can deal with it.
Yeah, I think I got my head around that in my training days, to be honest, Mark, as well, because I've run a lot of events, and sometimes people just aren't in the mood. I mean, I ran a conference when literally about 10 minutes before I was due to start, they announced that they were kind of laid off a quarter of the people.
Wow.
So you can imagine it wasn't the place for gags. And as a trainer, me and my people, we get evaluated by people, we get a score maybe 6 times a week, and you will have 90 people love you and one person doesn't. And of course, the only person you ever look at is the one who doesn't. Yes. So I've kind of got used to the fact that not everyone will love you, and sometimes things will not be about you, but will be out the room, and sometimes you screw up. All of those are possible, right?
But I think the key is understanding whether it was you, whether it was the room, whether it was the environment, whatever. Yeah. Because I think one thing with the comedy circuit is ultimately people walk into that room to have fun.
Yes.
They don't walk in there to be miserable. So there's the whole adage that it's, when some people say the audience, it wasn't the audience. The audience are there to have fun, but if you're just not the right fit for the audience, then, you know, if you go on telling lots of sexual jokes and it's full of older people, they may not be for you. It's just understanding it's not your crowd.
No. And you know, you get that in training as well sometimes. And one of the things that I always talk to my people about when they're new to training is always love your audience. You know, because sometimes they're frustrating and they ask stupid questions, and you know, sometimes people are resistant and all that. That's what's going on in their head. But always love them. Always say, yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. One of the things I'm really keen to do. I mean, you can't do a lot of crowd work in 5 minutes because otherwise your time disappears. But because I'm a facilitator and I've spent a lot of time working with groups, I'm really looking forward to having the time to play a little bit more.
Yes, I always think that if your 5 minutes grows into 7, then give yourself 30 seconds or 45 seconds. It's all it never sounds like a lot of time when you say it like that, but it is a lot of time on stage to start getting your feet wet with talking to people in the audience and stuff like that. Because I guess a lot of comedians, especially in the open mic circuit, when they start out, they've got their script in their head. They're running through it. And I'll say this for myself, is that sometimes if something happens and it derails you, like you say with the tray of glasses, your brain's not quite turned into how I'm going to deal with that. And I think that's a valuable skill to start learning, because it's when if there's something going on in a room and everybody in the room can see it, and you on stage do not reference it,
just carry on.
And you're not in the room then. You're not part of the experience that everybody's having.
And it's kind of timing is really a challenge when you're starting out. As you know, I'm sure all your listeners will probably be timing is a problem forever, but it certainly is when you're starting out. And I'm used to a world where I'm a real expert on what I do, and so you give me. I was doing a 30-minute thing in Sweden, and I finished like 29 minutes, 59 seconds, you know, and I'd gone off and done stuff with the group, you know, and so just instinctively I know how to do that. But with comedy, you've got to have somewhere to go, and then you're thinking, okay, well, if this comes up, then I've got to leave something out, but still give the information that I need to make my last joke land, and you know, and that whole timing piece is coming together. But that's kind of interesting.
With that kind of experience, this is something because us comedians, we're always going on stage with watches and setting timers and stuff like that. With the experience you've kind of gathered, could you say, okay, this is 5 minutes?
Usually I've got pretty good at writing to 5 minutes, so I know pretty much how long that's going to take. You know, side and a half of A4 is pretty regularly 5 minutes. I do wish that comedy clubs had put a clock on the wall.
Yes,
I think that would be a real simple thing to do that would help everybody involved. Yeah, I know you get the red light and all that kind of stuff, but when you're in the zone, getting that red light 80% through is sometimes more of a distraction than a help.
I am 100%. I think there's some things some little touches a lot of the open mic nights that run they could do, and I think one of them is a clock. So even if it's at the back of the room, you can see where you're at, and you know if you're going to have to speed up or cut something or whatever to get to where you want to finish on time. I don't. You must have had it before as well. Was when you're on stage and you get the light. If you don't notice it first, they'll do the light again, and you're at that point you're thinking I've got a minute left. But that's the point they're trying to say. No, that's you out.
That is you out.
The light can be so. Because you feel like you have to make an acknowledgement to the person with it to say, yes, I've seen it, which then distracts you from what you're doing, which then and the audience see you do this, whether it's like a little raise of the eyebrow or a hand or you give a signal, but everybody sees it. And the immediate thing is people are like, why are they doing that? And they don't realise why you're doing it.
No.
But
no, it's funny. And I a couple of gigs ago, I did downstairs at the King's Head in Crouch End, and that's a lovely venue. And I'd been kind of focusing on got to be 5 minutes, you know, get it right, and that kind of led up to that. And then it came, so a couple of people didn't turn up. You know, do you mind doing 7? Sure. And, you know, it was kind of, and you know, I was really pleased to like just absolutely hit the 7. You know, having added a couple of things in on the night, and so that I felt okay. Now it's starting to come together. I'm kind of getting it now.
So, what's been your best experience you've had, or the best moments you've had on stage?
Yeah, I think that King's Head one was probably my favourite one because the quality of the people on the bill was really good. a little bit more than some of the other ones have been on in the past. And so I thought, oh, there's some really good people here, and sometimes a little bit intimidating. Some of them have just come back from Edinburgh or had their own shows and were trying out new things. Do you think, wow, it went really well? And then the people there are great and gave good feedback and follow up and all that kind of stuff. So that whole thing together, I felt as though it was kind of good competition, good delivery, but then good feedback. And when you get those three things, you think, I've had a great night.
Yeah, definitely. Can you say what your worst moment has been?
I think my worst was that one I mentioned with the glasses being dropped. So I think again it's kind of this mindset thing. So if your mindset is about learning, the question is, what did you learn? And in a sense, if everything goes well, you don't learn a lot. So I'm a bit perverse that way. I kind of quite, I can feel myself in business when things aren't going well. I can feel myself kind of hunkering down and digging in and thinking, right, this is where it gets interesting. When things are going well, I'm going, oh, okay, it's nice. It's not challenging. So I'm probably a bit weird that way.
So have you always had a desire for comedy?
Do you know that really funny thing? My mother died earlier in the year, and I was just starting to get into it. I went on a comedy course in Brighton, and I was telling my mum, and she told me two things I didn't know. She said, first of all, when you were very small, when you were just speaking, one of my aunties was a butcher, and she used to sit me on the side, and I would entertain the customers and do nursery rhymes and stuff like that. And then I'd won a children's talent competition at Butlins telling jokes, and I didn't know either of those things, so that was kind of interesting. And I think looking back, I used humour quite a lot at school and those kind of things, but unfortunately, I was academically quite good. And in the kind of 60s and 70s, if you're academically good, they stopped you doing anything practical.
Right.
So you didn't do woodwork, you didn't do metalwork, you just focused on the academic stuff, and that took me off and gave me a good career. And I wrote poetry and stuff like that as a kid, and then I think I got trained out of creativity, and now hopefully coming back to it.
So can you remember the first ever joke you ever told?
In life, you mean, generally? Yeah, I really can't. It must have been the Butlins one, which I suspect is in 1960s. I was telling jokes that were on the TV, was probably horribly racist or something like that. It's probably a good idea that social media wasn't around. Otherwise, somebody would be digging that out now, wouldn't they? But yeah. I really couldn't say.
What about? Do you remember the first joke you wrote with the aim of doing stand up, like whether it's part of your course or anything?
Yeah, my first set was around I would say start with experiences, and I just reached an age where the NHS decided I should do a prostate test and that kind of stuff, and so I wrote about my prostate test and going to the doctors and all the rest. And it actually started with a line that just came to me, which made me laugh out loud and went well in the set, which was, afterwards, I live in a small village and there's a Tesco Express, and so afterwards I said, it was fairly strange. You said, noticing I was standing in the queue for Tesco Express. I turned around and there was the doctor that did my prostate exam getting chocolate fingers. that just made me giggle, and then I kind of wrote lots of other stuff around that. Yeah, that was the one that I was most proud of in the very early days.
That's good. I like that. That's very, very good. So on a technical point then with stand up, you touched on it earlier when you said, can your comedy be learned or you born with it? What's your thoughts then?
I've heard this in just about every walk of life, that there's this debate, isn't there? And clearly, if you've got tremendous talent, that's got to help. If you're a natural talent, I like motorsport. Example is, in Formula One, those guys are tremendous talent, got tremendous reflexes, all that kind of stuff. But it's interesting how many of their dads were in motorsport.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is that genetics, or is that the fact that aged 8 they got a go-kart?
Yes.
And that by the time they were 16, they'd done 10,000 hours or whatever the right number is of driving in the car. And I used to rally, had some coaching in rally driving, and they said hours in the car. More important than anything else is hours in the car and feedback on how you're doing. And so I think, yes, talent's got to help. But there's a great quote, I think it was one of the American presidents, maybe Calvin Coolidge or something like that. They said, the world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence is all that matters. And so I think you can definitely, if you learn faster and if you really work on improving, you'll beat someone with raw talent and no application.
Yeah, I guess it's when people talk about like sportsmen and they say they've got natural talent. They probably don't have natural talent. It's the fact that they've been doing this from the age of, their priority has been the sport rather than the education. Or if they get taken up by a football club from an age of 7 or 8, they spend all of their time playing football And yes, they still get their education, but the football is the one thing that, and they're learning from the experts.
Yeah.
I think everything in this world might be proved wrong here. Everything in the world can almost be learnt.
Certainly to a level. I mean, one of the guys who used to work for me years ago was an Olympic silver medalist rower, and we were talking to him about his experience at the Olympics. And so, if you stay in the Olympic Village, you don't think that people are the same species, because the basketball players and the gymnasts and the power lifters and the rowers, and the swimmers. If you're not a certain shape, you're not going to be world class as a swimmer. But given you are, then it's about work.
Yeah, the hard work you put in, the training hours,
Whereas for a lot of other things, there isn't a kind of physical, stand up there. As we can see by looking around, there isn't a kind of physical ideal that gives you comedy. Although maybe that kind of slightly battered hangdog approach is mindset and physical appearance is helpful. I don't know.
I think there is a little bit of that. The first impressions count. If you see somebody that looks a bit daft, there's an immediate audience perception of what's going to happen. But you can then create that. You can. There's plenty of people out there may come on looking in a particular way, but that's actually not them at all.
Yeah, that's something I'm kind of playing around with. As I can't say I've got an established character yet. I'm playing around with things, but playing around with how you dress to kind of reflect that character and those kind of things.
Yeah, because I've noticed that in a world of overshirts and hoodies, you are certainly smarter than the average.
well, my first set was about how we need more psychopaths in life, and our second set that was, and there's a TV show called Billions, and the outfit came from one of the characters on that who I thought, oh, he's the kind of person I've got in mind, and so that kind of all very dark blue and stuff, and so he was my model for that, and that seemed to work pretty well.
Okay. An interesting question, I think, is talented writer versus talented performer.
They're definitely different skills, aren't they? And I know there are people who make a living doing one or the other, and so it's possible to be one or both. I find it difficult to separate the two. I kind of think by writing, as you see. So when I've got an idea about something, I research it obsessively. I try to work everything, understand everything that's already been done. And then at some point, it starts to click into shape. And I've done it in lots of different areas. It clicks into shape. And then I'll be waking up at 3:00 in the morning and I've got to write,
Okay.
And that goes on until then I sort of write a book about something. The last one was On Purpose. And then once I've done that, I'm compelled to communicate. Reaching out to you is a bit like, well, I've got this idea and I'm thinking about, but unless I talk to somebody about it, or write it down, it doesn't really exist. So to me, they're indistinguishable. And then I don't feel like the writing works unless I perform it. In the past, it's been a training course. Now it's a comedy routine.
My personal opinion is that the performance is slightly higher than the writing, because I think a good
performance.
Yes, because I think the performer can tell a bad joke very well, but then on the flip side, you can tell a really well written joke really poorly, and it's nothing.
And that's the learning. I mean, last night I kind of started a new set, which is around a Yorkshire motivational speaker that isn't very motivational, and I did it quite deadpan, quite flat.
Yeah,
and it didn't kind of work. So I'm doing it again on Monday, and I'm going to try a different energy level and change a couple of things. So that was good learning.
Deadpan stuff, I think, always works in a bigger room with a lot of people in it.
Could be.
When you've got a very muted or smaller crowd, it's very hard, I think, to get that across.
Yeah.
And you get those people that laugh, shoulder shufflers.
Yeah.
But when you're on a stage with a big bright light, you can't see them.
No. You get a lot of big smiles, which is kind of, thanks for that. That was so. But and also, you learn about character and all the rest. And I'm not naturally a deadpan person, So as I was playing the kind of do a Yorkshire role, but it's a long time since I was that, I guess.
So with regards to, you just touched on it, writing, how often do you rewrite stuff?
Rewrite stuff. Oh yeah, I mean, last night was new material. There was quite a few people doing new material. I was, people bring along like a few post-it notes, or I'm kind of horrified by that thought. I've got to kind of overwrite something before I'm ready to get it out there. So I write a lot, and having written a lot of books. When I first started writing, I used to think, well, I'll wait till the muse comes upon me, and then 6 months later, you've done nothing. So writing's work. You have to just do the work, and you have to sit down and capture stuff. And I was a little bit horrified this morning. I working on a set on artificial intelligence. And what I tend to do is I tend to read quite a lot about subjects before I do it. So this arrived in the post this morning. The history of artificial intelligence, but it's like 1,200 pages. And okay, that's a bit much even for me. So I tend to immerse myself in those kind of things, and I think by writing. So my ideas aren't clear. I couldn't do an Adam Bloom and turn up on the stage with 6 things I want to talk about and wow the audience. I have to have the idea pretty well developed. At this stage, it might change.
So do you rewrite? As in, when I say rewrite, I mean like a new set. Because one of my big philosophies in the whole thing is that if you're new to performing and stand-up comedy, everybody gets bored after probably 15, 20 times, feeling like they're doing the same set. And you think, I've got to change it now. I've got to change it now. Because you start thinking, what if somebody in the audience has seen me before? I think that's a constantly changing things to something completely different, I think is a very detrimental way about going it. You never get to the point where your first set is ever finished. You think it's finished, but there'll be points where as you gain more experience over the next few months, you'll go, oh, that's how my writing's changed. But you never go back to look at the first set again and think, if I can change that, I can make that better. So I'm always intrigued, like with you being a writer, do you have this passion to keep going, right, I now need to write about this. I need to write about a whole new topic, another new topic, and you keep...
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. And so I was quite disciplined about that first set. So I did the first set 12 times, and that's 5 minutes. And after every time, I kind of reviewed it, refined it, tweaked it. And I was getting pretty consistent laughs. And, I'm writing, being what I am, I'm writing to a last per minute target and all that kind of stuff, And so I can't, but what I was getting a bit bored with it by the end of that. But what was nice is I've now got 7 minutes on that theme. And I've just started to get bookings for 10 minutes. So I'll do a 10 minutes on that theme just by adding in some small bits of you. But I've got a backlog of like 4, 5 to 10 minute sets that I really want to do, of which I've just started doing the third one. But what they do is they potentially intersect.
Yes.
So the psychopaths one, I'm writing one on, I'm really angry about personality testing. So I'm writing some stuff on what a stupid idea personality testing is, and that will fit into that. So that could take that from a 10 to a 20. So I'm kind of thinking ahead. I've got different things where I feel the need to try out more material just to see what lands. One of my challenges is I don't think my relatability has always been a concern of mine because I live a pretty weird life. I travel a lot. I spend most of my time with multinationals and all that good stuff. And I don't have a lot to say about what's happening in a supermarket or at my age on a dating app and that kind of stuff. So the stuff that annoys me is like personality testing or the future of artificial intelligence. And I need to find a way that I want to talk about stuff that is kind of important, but you need to make it relatable and funny. And that's kind of the interesting. And I need to just try out a lot of things and see which ones people just go, that's what the hell is that? And which bits really engage people.
Yeah, it makes me laugh when the amount of people that mention, as they call it, the apps. It's always the dating apps. And I'm like, I've been married for God knows how many years. Well, the apps didn't exist. I don't even know which way right or left is in terms of good or bad.
But I funny the stuff I was doing on Psychopaths. I was I got this little bit about how the police use social media to evaluate, risk and personalities and all the rest. And I talked about TikTok, and I was with a group of people, and they were like late 30s, early 40s, mainly in the audience, and it was quite small, and it was quite workshoppy on the night.
Yeah.
One of them said, "Oh, this stuff's a bit young for us. We're in our 40s. I said, what? I'm in my mid-60s, and you think that this is too young for you? Come on, get a grip,
Yeah.
So that was kind of interesting.
I always think when people say things like that, it gives you license to then play with them. Yeah, I think that's the ultimate aim for a lot of comics, is to want to be able to play and then go in and out of sets and have a bit of fun here and there. And you make the night memorable for everybody rather than, it's not just about the quality of your jokes. It's about the quality of you as a performer on the night with the other people and having fun.
And I'm really keen to do that. I just don't feel as though I've got the kind of toolkit of stuff that if we go off in this direction, can I bring it back? And, so I'm looking forward to doing that. I really am.
I'm kind of starting to get there. But I'm still at the stage, if I go off, if you watch me on stage, you'll see my brain go, where was I?
Yeah.
I need to get to that point of going, I know exactly where I was.
Yeah.
I'm straight back into it, and you don't realise I've done it.
No, it's interesting. What you asked before about, is it learnable? And one of the things I do know is that some of what I call platform skills, the skills that go around, actually writing funny and performing, that's great. But there's a lot of stuff that goes around that.
Yeah.
And memorization is one of them. And I know, for example, that creativity and memorization can be taught. And so if you can learn those two skills, they're really useful in comedy. If you can learn public speaking, that's really useful in comedy.
Yeah.
And so I use, memorization techniques I haven't used for a long time and needed to use for a long time. But I kind of went back, and there's a book by Tony Bazan called The Brain Book, and so okay, I can use that. And so I create these memory palaces with all of the bits of the routine in them, and it's almost impossible to forget where you are if you use that technique.
Do explain that, because I've never
Yeah.
heard that term.
So what you do is you take a place you know well. Our latest one is set in the lounge of my house, and then you go in through the door, and the first thing you see on the table is the first bit. So for me, it was a small Yorkshire man in a cap watching a black and white TV.
Yeah.
And then next to them on the settee is the next bit, which is a life coach who's made consistently bad decisions. He's got one leg and he's smoking and he's on the phone to his third ex-wife and all that kind of stuff. And so you create a series of little images, and they should be bright, colourful, memorable, and you put them in a physical place. And then when you start the set, I'm walking through the door. What's to my left? It's the little Yorkshire guy with the cap with the black and white. That reminds me of the first 3 or 4 lines of the set.
Oh,
and then I met Trevor, the life coach. And so you construct a physical, a bright, vivid memory. So my house is now full of little places. I got in the front door and I'm thinking about my prostate exam. So it's a pure technique. Tony Bazan is the guy who writes about it, the memory book. It's very powerful, and there's like 20 different techniques in there, but that's one that really works. It's the kind of thing that these people who remember cards or lists of names, or it's the techniques they use.
So when this is now where I've got things going on in my head about what you've just said, is so do you have something physical there in the room that represents that? Or is it a case of, okay, you're memorizing what's on point 1 and what's on point 2 and what's on point 3? Because my idea now was just like, even if it's a picture frame with somebody, something small that's just stuck to a wall, the Yorkshireman in the hat.
Yeah.
And the next one is I've even forgot what the next one was that you mentioned.
Yeah. So yes, I mean it's something. So there's a really useful test about whether something's memorable, and that's, did you remember it?
Yeah.
And so things that are memorable, if you associate something, a bizarre image, bright colors, music, smells, try and make it as multimedia as possible. So in my previous set, there was a little thing about the police looking for people with antisocial personalities. And so my image for that is an old sepia police recruitment image like that kind of, your country needs you type thing, with an ant underneath it, a big ant trying to climb up it. And so that reminds me, it's police, it's recruitment, it's antisocial, and so it's creating those little images, and that's on the wardrobe at the side of my lounge. And then I know that next to that is the place where the social media stuff sits, and so it helps you sequence your set.
That's really interesting, because I have it many times where I'll always come off stage and go, I forgot that bit. Yeah, I forgot that bit as well.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, these are the bits that the audience don't realise you've forgotten them, but they may be the good link that gives a bit bigger laugh to the next part, but because you haven't said that.
Yeah, I missed one bit out of the earliest bit of my set last night that kind of set up some of the other things. I thought, I've missed that, and that was that was a clue to me that it was the first time I'd done it. But I went back into the notes of my memory palace this morning and said, I need to make that bit more vivid, so that next time I don't miss that. And so you won't get it 100%, but it's I've never taken a note on stage, even from the first gig or on new material.
Yeah, sometimes when I see people take notes on stage, it feels like it gives me license to take notes for myself. And then when I feel like I have the notes, I feel like I start using them. And I think that's a bad practice to get into. I did it last night, and I shouldn't have done. I should have just gone on. Everywhere else had notes, but I should have just gone on and went, sod it, and just gone with what I could remember. I wrote down my set, just like keywords as beforehand, just to try and put it back into the memory banks and such. And it probably would have been enough.
Yeah.
But I went with the notes, and we ended up with a very low audience count in the end, and just sitting there with the notes in my hand and like just constantly looking down. It's like, because they're there, I'm looking at them.
Yeah.
If they're not there, I can't.
No, I'd find them quite distracting.
Yeah.
Doing that, and I've made a lot of kind of videos, 3 minutes up to 20-minute videos, and I always teleprompt that. I always write it and teleprompt it, because if you want your meaning to be absolutely precise, particularly if you're doing something short, give me an hour and we can ramble on and have an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
But if you want me to get something in 3 minutes, there's no words can be wasted. And I understand some top comedians do use teleprompters now in their big shows.
Yeah, I think that's it feels disappointing.
It does, yeah,
Because I've seen there is a there's some of them that hide it better than others. I've seen Ricky Gervais. I think it's actually on one of his Netflix specials. There's a camera shot which catches him with notes.
Right.
Because I assume, obviously, you've seen Ricky Gervais before. He has the big plectrum or the stand to the side of the stage where he goes to get a drink, and he brings out a ridiculously sized can of Foster's, I think it is. But there was an overhead camera shot, and you could see a white piece of paper on top.
Yeah.
I'm assuming he's using that to walk over there to get the drink, have a look, and go again.
And I can't imagine what it's like to do 2 hours. I imagine I probably would be. It would be a very large memory palace for a 2-hour set, I think. So I might just want to remind you where the hell I am in it. Might be quite useful.
But it's also, when he's doing that as a Netflix special, he can cut and edit it.
Yeah.
And you kind of think, wow, you've performed it all over the world so many times, it back to front. Even if you mess it up on a Netflix recording, they're going to cut it out. And you can make fun of it and start again. Because
so what you're saying, Mark, is we should go straight to Netflix. I agree with you there. I think that would be an excellent plan.
I kind of did that. Not Netflix. I kind of did the notes hidden on stage. I took a book with notes and had it open and put it on the table. And I'm walking around the stage. A few people came up to me and said, "That's the best performance I've ever seen you do. Okay. You look natural. Everything looked great. Nothing looked off." I was like, okay. They obviously completely missed that I was doing, but I was completely aware. As I'm walking around the stage and I'm walking from one side to the next, I'm taking a quick glance at the notebook, which has just got one word on it. I go, that's the next bit I'm going to. And then the rest kind of just falls into place. And I felt like I was cheating, but it was actually quite nice that people went, I wasn't reading from a script. Yeah. It was just that word prompt.
Yeah. Yeah. So whatever works. I mean, I think one of the interesting things about comedy is how much of it is prepared, in the sense, you've got to know which word you punch word in. There's a certain wording that works, wording and an attitude and an expression that works. And you've got to do that, but you've got to make it feel like it was just happening for the first time with your mates in the pub. And that's a tremendous skill.
Yeah, definitely. So I noticed looking through soon when I was doing a little bit of research, I looked on your Instagram feed and I saw you had like you had some kind of conference as such with Adam Bloom.
Mm-hmm.
So was that like a one-to-one?
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was great. I mean, as somebody who's kind of obsessed about learning and kind of in the learning industry, I'll always try and get, I went on the Comedia course in Brighton. Was the first thing I did. 2 days of chance to write and get some principles and get up and do an initial set. Really helpful. And I'm a big believer in coaching, and so I've worked with a number of people actually. Chris Head, Deck Monroe, and more recently Adam, and each of them have a slightly different approach, but great advice on timing, and they don't. What I like about all of them actually is they don't take over your material, right? So you come with your material and you say, "This is what I want to do. This is what I want to say," but they'll say, "Oh, that's interesting. Maybe it just needs a beat there. Maybe it just needs something else to give people a pause before you get to the punchline, or what's the rhythm?" Or with Adam, we were talking through some of the joke construction and some of his stuff so detailed. Okay, so in that statement, the seesaw, can you get it so that it's got the same number of syllables before and after the switch? And you think, whoa, that's kind of pretty detailed stuff. And you do, and you think, oh, yeah, that does sound better.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had a great with Adam. You can send him your stuff and he'll kind of read it and watch the recording, and then you have a couple of hours together where you just go through it. What are you trying to do at this stage? How's it working? Is there anything that needs to be improved? And he'll give you some ideas, and it's really helpful.
Yeah. I've interviewed Adam on this before, and
I listened to that one last night.
Yeah, it's such a great person to chat to, and I've done one of his in-person workshops as well. You're seeing other people's experiences and stuff, and it's simple things that an audience member doesn't understand. But they are it's subconsciously they're aware of it. Is how if you end your punchline on a strong letter of the
Yeah.
alphabet,
Yeah.
it has more of a punch than something that maybe ends in like a S or something. If it ends on a T or a K or
Yeah.
a P, it's got that like almost like a firm stop.
Yeah.
And from what I can understand from myself is that when you end on a firm stop, it's almost like you're putting a full stop to say, I've done. Whereas if you end
Laugh
on a
now.
long, yeah, if you're ending on a longer bit and you allow people the permission to laugh, it's kind of what you're giving them. But if you kind of waffle on, and I still do this a lot, is I do a punchline and it ends and I don't give it enough time to breathe.
Yeah.
And then I just start saying words after. And then
Yes.
people are like, oh, he's not done yet.
Yeah.
We'll hold back. No, I was done. I should have just waited for half a second more.
Yeah.
And then people will come along and laugh.
Yeah, and sometimes it's the opposite. I mean, one of the little sections that I was talking through with Adam, he was saying, "Do you want people to laugh? You know, you're getting two short laughs, two small laughs there. Do you want people to laugh in the middle one? Because if you don't let them laugh and you run it in together, you'll get a bigger laugh at the end."
Yeah.
And I tried that, and he was absolutely right. So I said, he talks a little bit about, breath control. I'll tell you when you can breathe. I'll tell you when you can laugh. So there's a real craft to that. And I by no means have I mastered that, but what I like doing and working with all of these people, with Chris, with Deck, with Adam, is you learn. What I like to learn is their principles. How are they looking at this? And by the way, Chris Head has also written a very good book, looking at it from the point of view of like producing shows and all the rest. And so, if you've seen my Instagram, I do a lot of book reviews of comedy books because I've been a writer. I learn through books as well, and so. Yeah. I love to. I'll take them out, and I've created a document for myself, and it's now I think 150 pages of tips and different types of jokes and process for developing jokes. And this is the bit where in 6 months or so I'll be waking up at 3 a.m. thinking, okay, I've got it now. It needs to look like this.
Yeah.
So that's how I learn. Yeah. So that's kind of interesting.
So when you talk about accelerating your learning, so we've spoken about like the memory palace you've got. Is there anything else you've got in the armory of stuff like to get things into your head or even to help you develop an idea?
Yes, and again, I don't claim any of this is original to me. It's more a kind of synthesis of the stuff that I'm reading. So I've developed for myself a little worksheet. This is my when you start talking about creativity or dissecting some of these things, it doesn't sound at all funny. I always think with creativity training, do these things. These things are not creative, but if you do them, the output will be creative.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of structure. And my daughter said that one of her friends said to her, "What's your dad doing at the moment?" They know I kind of like having these hobbies. So he's at the moment he's dissecting and spoiling all comedy. So apologies if it sounds like that, but I start off with something. What's the thing that I want to talk about? The thing that usually annoys me or has kind of given me an emotional reaction.
Yeah.
And this will probably be controversial, Mark. Then I do association lists. What words? So artificial intelligence. What words do you associate with artificial intelligence? And I actually use artificial intelligence to do that. So when I'm writing a routine, I'll write an AI prompt to say, okay, I want to talk about motivational speakers in Yorkshire. Give me association lists for both and identify things where you think there's an overlap. Now, it's not great, but it starts to fill the paper and you start to say, oh, that's what I wouldn't have thought about. So I create association lists and look at the connections between them. Then I'm looking at what are my character angles and say what would these three aspects of my character make of these things and how would they comment on it. And I've got a series of prompts about what happened before, what happened after, what would happen if you had unlimited resources, just prompts collected from these books and how to define humor in those.
Yeah.
And then I've got a massive list of 75 different types of joke constructions. So once I've got my idea about what the joke is, I'll systematically try out maybe 10 different joke formations on doing that. And it really sounds boring, doesn't it?
No. AI actually fascinates me at the moment. It's one of those things which is, yes, it's controversial. I've done a few experiments with AI in the past. I've got my set on a Word document. I'll actually copy and paste it just for a laugh. I've never actually performed this as such. Copy and paste it and put it into ChatGPT or whatever. And said, can you rewrite this in the style of comedian X and see what it comes back with? And it's always quite interesting reading through it and you see what it's added and what it's taken away and how it's structured it slightly differently.
I did a spooky one recently. I was writing I've got a set that I want to do on artificial intelligence, and part of it is like how disappointed artificial intelligence will be in us, as it develops. it's a kind of spoof of the four. You remember the Four Yorkshiremen sketch where they're all sitting down at the end of the day. We had it rough. And the AIs are saying, well, we've got all this capability, and we've been asked to do trivial things. And so one of them, like, been trained on all of the literature in history, and has been asked to do an email reordering toner cartridges. And so I asked OpenAI to write an email ordering a new set of toner cartridges in the style of Jean-Paul Sartre. And it came back, and it was just brilliant.
Yeah.
It was about, why would we be interested in toner when there's an existential threat to the planet? And, and it just went on and on and on. And I remember thinking, I don't think I could improve on that. I could almost read that out on stage. It was just absolutely brilliant. And so it'll give you ideas. I was the executive coach for an AI startup company for a couple of years in Cambridge. And if you imagine like 100 Sheldon Coopers in a company, it was kind of like that from the Big Bang. And I went to a couple of conferences around it. It was really interesting. And there was a lot of work in biology where AI is now assisting doctors and biologists. And a guy said something interesting. He said, it's not that AI will replace biologists, but the biologists who use AI will replace the biologists who don't.
Yes.
I remember thinking, that's nice. I like that. And in my own business, we're using AI internally. We're using it for a lot of client conversations and those kind of things now. And we sat down and said, what's it for? And for us, what's it for is to do all the crap, to do all the admin, so that when we're having a conversation, we can be human.
Yes.
And so in comedy, the AI can do some of the drudge maybe, and maybe some of the research and that kind of stuff. But then we need to add the human bit, which is what makes it funny. If you ask AI to write a joke, it's a little bit disappointing usually.
Yeah.
This thing I did in Sweden this week was 250 people, and on every table they had iPads. And during the session, people were typing questions or comments, or they were doing little exercises, and the AI was analysing it. And so literally the second that that we stopped, you could project on the room, what do you think of this, and what are the top 3 questions that you had, and all that kind of stuff in real time. It was very good.
Yeah.
One of the things I would like just to talk about, if we've got time, Mark, is this kind of idea of kind of building your ecosystem for learning about comedy. Because there's never been an easier time to learn stuff. You've got all these books, and again, I review those on the social media. So many podcasts like this, great ways of kind of getting the experience of people who've been doing it for a while. YouTube videos, Netflix specials, coaching. There's just a ton of stuff, and I think if you want to learn something, if you're serious about it, then just connecting yourself to all this stuff, and if you start paying attention to it, you learn fairly organically. You can even do a degree in stand-up comedy now.
Can you?
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 places in the UK that do formal degrees. I think Kent University is one of them. I don't know how good they are. But that wouldn't suit me, because I don't like being constrained. I like to go off and learn stuff at my own, follow my own interests. But there's a lot of ways into it now. And one of the things I've noticed on the open mic circuit actually is a number of people who've been around for a while saying there's a lot of people coming through now who've gone on the comedy courses, and you can see it.
Yes.
And so I think if you can afford to go on, there's a lot of virtual ones. I like the face-to-face ones more, because I find it hard to say I'm going to be free every Wednesday for 10 weeks or Saturday afternoon, but I can carve out a couple of days. So I think, structured learning, and I know I meet a lot of people on the open mic circuit who just won't suit their style to do that. So I think it's a lost opportunity. I really do.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I started. I started with a in-person course. That was my shtick, and that the whole point of that really was to just get me on stage.
Yeah.
But not to go any further than one gig. That was it. Just to do one gig, to have a bit of a laugh,
give it
and
a
see
try.
what happened. And then you get addicted, and then it's like, I'm stuck in this thing.
A lot of people have said to me, it's like an apprenticeship. You just got to do your time. And I get that. That's how the system works. And, I'm trolling my way through to be able to, but I look at some of these things. So, well, you can't do a 10-minute gig-hour show until you've done 200.
Yeah.
People don't start at the same place. Some people maybe have never stood on a stage before. Other people like me have done 35 years of being in front of groups. So our learning is going to be different. And anyway, with an apprenticeship, you sit alongside someone who's experienced. You get constant feedback. There's a training course, progression, and all of that kind of stuff. In comedy, it's kind of sink or swim.
Yes.
And I get that's how the system works. And, I can't come in and change the system, so I'll play by the rules and kind of work my way through. But it's not the best way to develop talent.
No, but I guess when you need to get to a certain level, and then there's the opportunity for agents to then get involved, and those agents can then start pushing you towards bigger
Yeah.
and better gigs, and then you start performing bigger and better people, you start learning better, you start getting a lot better, and your rate of your acceleration in terms of learning and getting better in those environments is just going to go skyrocketing up. Because you see, I always think it's actually quite a useful resource to, when you look through people's Instagrams that you've gigged with and stuff, or even like some of the famous ones, and you just see the short clips and just watch how they've done it. And it doesn't always have to be in context, but if somebody frames a joke.
Well, you enjoy the Anthony Jeselnik stuff. He's got some stuff on Netflix already. I've seen his new show in a couple of weeks' time, but he's great at that. And you know that it's going to be somewhere. I'm quite interested in the structure. I know it's going to be somewhere I don't expect, and I'm feverishly thinking, where's this going? Where's this going? I'll never get it right with him. Never get it right.
And I think that's always the mark of somebody that's entertained you, isn't it? You haven't guessed it. If you guess it, you kind of like, it's like magic tricks, isn't it?
Yeah.
Once you know how it works, you're like, I wish I hadn't have given
Well, it's back to my daughter's thing about here goes Dad kind of deconstructing comedy and spoiling it. So I hope I can put it back together again and make it funny. But that is the challenge. And it's there's a lot to learn, tremendous amount to learn. 20 gigs in, I'm kind of a beginner, and something I'll talk about it. I write a book on life. One of the chapters on lifelong learning in the book about purpose is the just absolute joy of being a beginner. When you're a beginner at something, the only way is up, and everything is new to you. And I did, I told you that because I did okay academically, I got prevented from doing anything practical at school. And so last year when I was looking around for things, another thing I did was just some craft days, so I did glass blowing and wood carving. I found really talented people and spent a day with them just learning. I just had a ball, and actually they said, you've got a feel for glass blowing. It's a 7-year apprenticeship. And I thought, I'm not really up to invest in 7 years into glass blowing. But it was fun.
It's interesting. So back to kind of more the comedic side. Joke writing. What's your favorite joke? How did it come about and how's it evolved? But it doesn't have to be your best joke. It can just be your favorite joke.
I'm not sure it is my favorite joke, but one last night that you sometimes get something where you write a joke that you really love and no one else seems to get it.
Yeah.
And so I was giving my top 5 principles as a Yorkshire motivational speaker last night. And, Yorkshire people are not known for the amount of praise that they give.
Yeah.
And kind of quite dour. And so just a line that I had in there says, when you give people praise, it just encourages them. And to me, it still makes me giggle, but it got absolutely nothing last night. I thought, well, how can I get that idea across? Because it entertains me too much to take out, but it just didn't land.
Yeah.
And that one, something short like that just kind of flips things around. I'm going to see next week, I think it is, or the week after, Anthony Jeselnik. I don't know if you've seen any of his stuff.
No.
And he's brilliant because you never see his punchlines coming.
Okay.
Consistently, he'll say it, and at the end he just kind of flips it around. I think, wow, that is just so good. So he does a lot of broken assumptions. I quite like broken assumptions ones where you set up a situation, then at the end you've changed the what, the where, the how, the when. He does a thing on slavery. He talks about your slavery starting to become a problem, which is funny, as if he's just noticed it. Then he talks about, he found out a member of his own, his family had been involved in slavery, and you assume that's in the past, but then the punchline, it's my own brother, and so that whole story flips around at the end, brings it up to date, and so I like those kind of jokes, broken assumptions.
Yeah, I love jokes where you can't see the punchline coming, and they generally come from those that are so much more experienced, and they can hide them. I mean, I saw a clip of Adam Bloom not so long ago do a bit about how he was gigging in Germany, I think it was, and that when he went on first night, he realizes he speaks a bit too quickly, so he slowed it down by 20%.
Yeah,
and he got nothing. And then the next night he did the same, but then he slowed it down by 40% and then got nothing. And then the next night he slowed it down by 60% and then he got nothing.
Yeah.
And then the next night he went really slowly, and he started his set as he always would do and said, "Good evening, all you Jew killers." You just go, that was never in my thought. That was the reason they didn't get it.
Yeah.
That's why you had the silence. It was never there. But then
again, the structure behind that is kind of interesting, because what you do is in the setup, you give a certain amount of information in order to create an assumption. There's only so many things. It's, who, what, where, when, how. Those are the things that people need to get the full story. You don't need all of those, but you need some of those.
Yeah.
And so all you're doing is looking for one to leave out.
Yeah.
But which people will assume, and then turning it around. And so structurally, they're actually quite simple to write. It's hard to come up with a brilliant one, as always. Yeah. But if you've got that kind of template in front of you, you think, okay, which of these 5 things am I giving? Which do I not need to give? And which is the one I'm going to switch? Yeah. And just having that structure in mind makes them a lot easier to write.
Yeah, I think a lot of audiences these days they're looking for the punchline before it gets delivered, and if you can flip that so that it's not there, then it's a massive skill and something I dream of having. The last thing you want is somebody shouting your punchline beforehand, but then sometimes that gives you a little bit of license to then mess about with them.
Yeah, no, for sure.
The actual audience member.
Yeah, well, it's one of the things that it's a trap that I read about, and I've seen a lot of people fall into on open mic is you can always get a laugh by swearing. And I see a lot of people kind of, whose material relies on them just, throwing swear words in. And I think, well, that's great, but it's not going anywhere. It's not the material really. It's just a kind of shock value thing. And there's a place for it, don't get me wrong. But that's something I try and avoid. Occasionally you use it, but if that's where your laughs come from, then I don't think your material's strong enough.
Yes, no, I completely agree. And I was having this very thought walking the dog this morning, going along, and I'm just not so much reciting the set, but I'm thinking about what I said last night and some of the words I said, and I'm very conscious that I do try to swear for effect, but try not to do it too often. Yeah. And that's the key thing. I think if you can add a few in there, it helps. But if you saturate your set with it, it soon becomes monotonous, and people they're not so much enjoying the set after a little while. It's like, oh, he's swearing again. And it comes across as lazy sometimes, unless that's your complete persona, in which case
or if it's relevant to the story, where it does kind of work. So it's kind of interesting to kind of try and navigate all of that stuff, because I think one of the things that I did very early on is I chased the laugh rather than said what I wanted to say, and you could see that the set was kind of evolving, and I thought, I don't want to go there. Actually, I need to find a way to make it funny, but this is what I want to say. And so I think it will be easy just to keep following. It sounds like strange, doesn't it? I'm not following the laughs in stand-up comedy, but I want it to be kind of interesting stuff, and maybe a little bit more challenging than just chasing laughs. I love Stuart Lee. I mean, he's my kind of hero. And when I was asked on the comedy course, they said, "Who's your favourite comedian?" I said, "Stuart Lee." And they said, "Let me stop you there. Do not try and do what he does. The guy's a genius." And so I certainly wouldn't try and mimic him, but I do admire him.
I think it'd be virtually impossible. My I wouldn't say comedy hero, but the comedian. If anybody ever asked me, my favourite comic is always Mitch Hedberg. If you're not aware of him, go and look him up. He's dead now. He died a long time ago. But his comedic style is very deadpan, one-liner. It's silly jokes, but it's so good. And there's so many analysis on him on YouTube, and he's probably considered one of like the greatest, I guess, one-liner type style comedians of a generation that went far too soon.
Yeah.
And you can see.
I went to see Daniel Kitson the other day doing his thing where he has. There was 150 people in the audience, and his show has 153 speaking parts. So everyone in the audience has a script, and when it comes to your turn, you've got to shout a bit out. And he uses it to have an argument with himself and with about audience participation and the story. It was on so many layers. It was really funny.
So with your time on this open mic circuit so far, what's the one thing you'd like to see change?
I don't think this is changeable, but coming from the world that I inhabit normally, there's a lot of money in it.
Yeah.
And, so I'm working with multinationals. They have good budgets. They stay in nice places. Everything works. You can use good suppliers and all the rest. On the open mic circuit, nobody's making any money.
Yeah.
Performers are doing it for free, which I think, by the way, is absolutely right. I mean, I think if it's a hobby and you're learning, then you should be prepared to put the time in. But the developers, the people who run it, a lot of them are doing it for fun. A lot of them are doing it to get airtime themselves. And look at the fees that, I should say this really, as I buy a bit of coaching in, but the fees that people charge for coaching are a tiny fraction of what you get in the corporate world. And so that's a miss for me. I think if you had the resources, that proper training for people and that kind of stuff, it could be even better.
Okay. So what are your ambitions as well going forward in comedy?
Yeah, this is an interesting one for me. I've got a coaching session early next week, actually. Oh, no, tomorrow, actually. Really thinking about my objectives for the next set. So I've been looking to start getting offers of 10 minutes. I've had some paid work, which is kind of nice. Not because I need the money, but it's just like how you keep score, isn't it?
Yeah.
That was worth doing. So I'm keen to do bigger audiences, keen to be alongside, better quality comedians so I can learn from them. I don't really have an aspiration to, spend 60 nights going around medium-sized towns in the UK, living in a Premier Inn. So that's I don't think I'm a good prospect for that kind of thing. But I would like to do some festivals. I think maybe next year I'll do some of the smaller regional festivals and keep having fun with it.
Yeah. So the little fun question I always ask is if you do become super famous and Netflix or BBC come knocking and they're putting on your special and they ask you what music would you like to walk onto the stage to, what would you pick?
I would pick Anarchy in the UK by the Sex Pistols. It's for the reason that I went to university in the era of punk. Saw the Pistols a few times in Manchester and Salford and places like that. I loved that kind of energy and the anarchy of it. And I was always kind of a bit anarchic. And then I'm really aware that I've significantly sold out. So, I started off with, full of vim and vigor and anarchy and ended up the CEO of my own international company.
But no, what I'd like to do is offer you the Comedian's Challenge if you're up for this.
Yes, I've heard about this on the previous podcast, so that'd be kind of interesting.
Yeah, so for anybody that is new to this, I like to give a challenge to every comedian to read a joke from the Little Book of Shit Jokes by Sid Finch. The comedian gets to pick their joke, but they don't get to pick it by words. They only get to pick it by page number. So what they get is a complete surprise. Bear in mind the title of this book. So the quality of what you'll be telling on stage.
Could be an improvement on my normal stuff, Mark, actually.
I'm waiting for somebody to put this into a full-on set and use it continuously. Okay. We'll see. One day, maybe.
And are you allowed to kind of edit it a little bit, or does it have to be as out of the box? Okay.
No, you could do it. You can, as long as the premise kind of stays the same. If the joke is about a school teacher or somebody, and it makes more sense that you're talking about an aunt or an uncle that could have said this.
Okay.
You can go down that route. I'm not monitoring these that closely.
Okay. And will you send me this afterwards? I don't need to write it down now.
No, I'll send you a picture of the thing after. So I need from you one other thing is if you pick a page number that's already been picked, we go again, because no comedian should have the same joke, even though everybody's plagiarizing Sid Finch. So if you can give me a number between 5 and 95.
72.
Has gone, unfortunately.
Okay, 73.
Okay.
We have free page.
There's 2 on this page, so you can have joke 1 or joke 2.
Joke 2.
Joke 2.
It's likely to be the worst if they put it further down the page. So let's go.
No, I think you're right. What did a cannibal get when he arrived late for dinner? The cold shoulder.
Okay, that is poor.
Yeah.
Oh, that'll fit perfectly in with my stuff.
Yeah. So if you at any point record it, and then if you post it on Instagram, add us as a collaborator. We'll share it all about and have a bit of fun with it. There are some examples already on our. If you look through our wall, there's already examples of what some people have done, and some of them are exceptional. Some of them are okay. Some people have taken the chicken route and actually stopped their set and said, "I've got to tell you this joke."
Yeah,
Please laugh at the end of
it's
it.
Mark's fault. Let's be clear. Unless I think what I'd do is I would try it, and if it gets a laugh, I'll take credit, and if it doesn't, I'll say that was Mark that made me do that.
Yeah, that's fine. That's been done as well. I've had many a blame for ruining somebody's set at the end of the night. But no, it's a bit of fun, and it's also it's interesting to see how people tie these in, or if they don't want us to tell it standalone, how they can tie it into their sets and stuff like that.
No, for sure.
It's quite cool.
Okay, I will give that a try.
So where can people find you?
So the best place for the comedy stuff is on Instagram, Kevan Hall comedy, all one word, and my name is spelled Kevan with an A, Kevan. If you search for me online, there is another Kevan Hall, spelt the same, who is an African-American clothes designer from Hollywood. So if a very stylish small guy with dreadlocks turns up, it's not me. but funnily enough, we've actually become friends because we kept getting emails meant for each other. So he's now a friend of mine, and he invites me to his fashion shows and that kind of stuff. So that's been absolutely delightful over the years. But that is not me. So Kevan Hall comedy on Instagram. That's where I put all my book reviews and gigs and all that kind of stuff.
Excellent stuff. And you can find us on Instagram, Open Mic Comedy Pod. We've got a website, which is openmiccomedypod.com. Always ask, whichever platform you're listening to this on, please give it a nice little review. If you're not already followed or subscribed, please do so. It enables us to get up the rankings, to be seen by all the charts and stuff, and get pushed out to people, and then more people can listen to all the lovely guests that we seem to be having on lately. So lastly, I'd like to say thank you for your time today, Kevan.
Thank you. And again, if you haven't got this as part of your learning ecosystem, then subscribe to it. And every so often you'll get another little dollop of stuff that will keep the engagement, the motivation high. So it's valuable stuff. Thank you, Mark.
No problem. And for everybody else, I'll speak to you all again very, very soon.